Hello and welcome to our second class on Meguilat Esther. So if you were not here last week, you're more than welcome to watch the replay. We're going to continue. I'm just going to briefly remind you what and summarize what we said last week. I'm just going to try to adapt up. There we go. So last week we were discovering how the text of the Meguilat Esther is so very essential to our generation. If you remember, we were saying that there are several eras in the world, in our history, and we are currently the era of revelation of Islam, which was the era of, sorry, I'm just going to mute everyone. Which was the era of Nevi'im, where we had a revelation of Hashem. Hashem was revealed. We could speak clearly with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and if we had problems, if we had questions, we could go to a prophet or to a Kohen, and they would be able to get the right answer from Hashem directly. So this was an era that disappeared with the destruction of the Second Temple. And what is very interesting is that the story of Meguilat Esther is a transition in time because it starts after the destruction of the first temple, before the rebuild of the Second Temple. So we are getting prepared in this Megillah, in this story of Esther. Hashem is actually preparing us. And how is he preparing us? He is preparing us to transition from an era where he's revealed to an era that we know, because it's been 2,000 years like that, where he's hidden. He's not revealed. We have to look for him. We have to try to find him, right? Where in his hiddenness. So this is why it's so important to understand this text and to see what type of secret it reveals. Because in the Megillat Esther, as we saw last week, Megillat Esther is paradoxal because Megillah comes from legalgel, that means to reveal, right? And Esther it means a secret. So basically, we are going to reveal the secrets. This text is not any text, it's the text that is going to help us connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and get a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the generations of the future, in the generations of Mashiach. And this is also one of the reasons why it is an obligation to read the Megillat Esther. We are not obligated to read any parasha, right? But we are obligated to read twice a year on that same day of Purim, the Megillat Esther, and on the Shabbat before that, Shabbat Zachor, to read Zecher al Amalek. Okay, so those are the two only texts that we need to read as an obligation. So now I want to start the narrative of the Megillah. So we're going to take that text and I'm going to ask, so I'm going to try to share with you here on Zoom. Hold on just 1 second, if you allow me to organize. There we go. Okay. So now back to Zoom. I'm going to share with our friends on Zoom. Voila. And we are going to read verse 1 and 2 in English. Who wants to read? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol yamid baro. Don't fight. Okay, thank you. The first verse and the second verse in English.
It happened in the days of Achashverosh, who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Nubia.
Okay, great, right? So first we are introduced, today we said we're going to be introduced to the characters of the Megillah. And we're going to try to understand what we were maybe not taught in school or as kids. We want to understand the story behind the characters. Okay, so now the Megillat Esther starts like that. Vayehi bime Achashverosh hu Achashverosh. Okay, so and it was in the times of Achashverosh, that Achashverosh, right? Why are we insisting we are starting the Megillah and the first person right away we're introduced to Achashverosh? Who is Achashverosh? The king of Persia, right? And we are told it was in the time of Achashverosh that Achashverosh, we're going to see why we say that, and he was ruling over 127 countries, right? Why isn't it just written Achashverosh, who reigned over 127 countries? Why do we have to emphasize like that on him and the fact that he was the king? First, because we have to understand what is a melech, right? He was not a melech. It says here he was a molech. He was reigning on these countries, but he was not the king of these countries. Why? Because there is something very important. A title of a king is something that is merited. It's something that you merit. What is a melech? What is a king?
Give orders.
Okay, but he's someone who gives orders.
Well, it's usually passed down, like your father and.
Passed
like,
down. Okay, so it's a heir. He's an heir of a kingdom, right? Of a crown
Respect.
that people respect. Okay, that's interesting. And why do they respect him? Either because he is the son of the previous king or because he conquered. And he conquered also. If you look at, for instance, like Alexander the Great, he conquered half of the world, right? He fought for the kingdom. He battled. He killed other people, right? What happened with Achashverosh? Achashverosh, he didn't battle to get the kingdom, and he didn't even inherit from that kingdom. He became the king of those 127 nations, countries, because he bought with his money those countries. So is he legitimate as a king or not? The fact is, he is still the king. He's still the emperor of those 127 countries. But as a person of power, do you feel very legitimate to be a king if you are not from a lineage of kings, or if you didn't battle for it, especially at that time? If you just bought with money, are you legitimate? And this is something that is going to be really prevalent in the way Achashverosh expresses himself, and everything that he will do will be around that imposter syndrome that he has. He really feels as an imposter somehow because he's not a legitimate king as we understand it, really. That is very interesting because he could be a legitimate king even buying countries had he earned that money. But he doesn't feel legitimate even more because he didn't earn that money. He didn't steal that money. He got it per accident. So how is it possible that it's per accident? And again, remember that the idea of the Megillat Esther is going to reveal Hashem's hashgacha pratit in everything that we consider mikre. Remember, mikre is random, right? And they are the same letters as rak, mi, Hashem. Meaning, really, there is no randomness. There's no hazardous, or there is no, how do you say? Happenstance? Coincidence, exactly. There is only the will and the plans of Akadosh Baruch Hu. And we have to understand that this is the leitmotiv behind the Megillah. So how did he became a king? Sorry, he became a king because there was a king before him, a few generations before him. His name was Nebuchadnezzar. In Hebrew, Nebuchadnezzar, in English, okay? He is the king of Babylon, and he was the king of Babylon. He was the king who destroyed the first Beit HaMikdash, okay? Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar was very rich. And because he was a megalomaniac, okay? Megaloman, like he was all about himself.
Oh,
Because of that, egotistical, okay? So because of that, he decided no one should ever inherit his wealth, and he decided to hide under the Euphrates, the river, all his riches, right? And randomly, but really it's not random, one day, Mr. Achashverosh discovers, digging under the Euphrates, he discovers the riches of Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. And obviously, like he takes them for him, and he buys 127 countries with that money. So now
No, it wasn't the son of Nebuchadnezzar.
he was not the son of Nebuchadnezzar. The son of Nebuchadnezzar, the grandson actually, was Balthazar, and we're going to speak about him very soon. So Achashverosh had the title of emperor of this empire, of this Persian empire, but in reality, he was not really their true legitimate king. And plus, he had that imposter syndrome, right? So he felt he needed to regain his legitimacy, to regain that crown. And how would he gain the recognition of his kingship? He wanted to show his people that he was a legitimate king. And how would he do that? He wanted to be called the king by showing his power, his responsibility, his care for his subject. And the problem is that he has a very, very diverse population in his kingdom. It says here from Kush from Odu to Kush, from India to Ethiopia, okay? Now, Labriut, we could consider from India to Ethiopia, this is a very diverse type of population. They don't really have anything in common. How can we even call them a nation, right? Or an empire? They don't have anything in common, whether in their skin color, in their traditions, in their language even, right? But he wanted to unite and to show them that he was the one, right? So why do we repeat his name? We say in the years that took place in the years of Achashverosh, this Achashverosh, right? Because it's to make us realize that he is one person. He's the same person who got that money, supposedly randomly, who bought everything, all those 127 nations, who is feeling so insecure about his kingship and his crown that he will need to prove to everyone by organizing big banquets, and we're going to see a lot of parties in order to prove his power, right? But because he wants to prove his power, he's also that same king, that same person who will kill his wife Vashti for the sake of his minister Haman. And he's also the same person at the end of the Megillah who will kill his minister Haman for the sake of his wife, Esther. He's full of paradox. He's an empty shell. For him, there's only appearance. Whatever is inside is not coherent. So from the beginning of the narrative, we need to understand that he's really unstable, and incoherent, okay? Now we can think, in many stories that we tell to kids, many fairy tales, you have a bad king that ends up becoming a nice king, right? This story of Ahasuerus could have been that, he changed over the years and he finally became a good person. He saved the Jews and everything. But the truth is, no. From the beginning of the Megillah, what are we told? Don't be blurred. Ahasuerus, don't be confused. Don't get confused. Don't be lured by the story. Don't think that he became a good person. Bimei Ahasuerus, who Ahasuerus? From the beginning of the story to the end of the story, he is that Ahasuerus that you met at the beginning. Okay, so it's very important to keep that in mind, because we might think, at the end, like he changed out of love for his queen Esther. No, this is not a fairy tale. This is the story of Esther that is going to reveal us that even through all this darkness and even through this appearing coincidence, there is no coincidence. There is only HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand, right? So now let's go back 1 second on India and Ethiopia. The Gemara gives us a first opinion on that. And it says that Hodu and Kush are the opposite of the world, right? It's true. One is Africa, the other one is India. It's really at the opposite of the world, especially at that time where they didn't have America yet, right? So it was really the opposite of the world. And the Gemara says also, but at the same time, Hodu and Kush are very similar. And why are they very similar? The Gemara tells us it's to understand that it's so huge, they're close because it's governed as if it was only one country. He used to govern his empire as if it was just one country, wanting to rule over everyone the same way. Okay. Now let's go to the other verse. Okay, the second verse. Who wants to read in English? You want, Olivia? Go.
In those days when King Ahasuerus occupied the royal throne in the fortress Shushan.
Okay. So Ahasuerus is sitting on a throne, right? Why are we mentioning that throne? That throne, we have to understand that it's a replica of Shlomo HaMelech's throne, of King Solomon's throne. What was so special about this throne? It was a throne made out of gold, accessible through 7 steps, okay, orned by diamonds. So it was 7 steps of gold, orned with diamonds, with 2 lions on each side of the throne, okay, and 2 verses of Torah written on each, engraved on each side of the throne also, right? When the king Solomon would go up the stairs, the lions would spray perfume on the king as he would approach, and then he would sit on the throne, right? So Nebuchadnezzar, who destroyed the first temple, he stole the throne of King Solomon at one point, as well as many other things. And we know that all the kelim from the Bet HaMikdash, the first Bet HaMikdash, were stolen by Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar stole that throne because he wanted to represent the king also, even though he had acquired the kingship by fight and by acquiring it with the wars, but he still wanted to show his greatness by sitting on that very unique and very almost magical throne, right? And so the thing is that the throne really had a special power, and it would push away the king, Nebuchadnezzar, because he was not merited to be a good king. So the throne itself would push away and would reject Nebuchadnezzar. So when, imagine Ahasuerus with that imposter syndrome, he also wants to prove that he is worthy of the crown of this empire. Obviously, he's going to say, okay, you know what? There is an amazing thing I can do in order to prove that I am a merited king compared to Nebuchadnezzar, for instance. Instead of using that original throne of King Solomon, I'm going to make an exact replica. It's going to look exactly the same, but it will not have that special power. So when I sit on it, everybody will think, whoa, he's a good king. He's worthy to be the king, right? So he decides to have a project to start that and to have artisans and workers who will work and create an exact replica of that throne. It happened that those refined workers were only found in Persia, not in Babylon, but in Persia, and where? In Shushan. Okay, so he decides to have the throne made in Shushan. And the thing is that once it was made, it was impossible to move. It was such a heavy throne. Imagine something monumental, like with gold and diamonds and huge, with 7 steps. It was a huge thing. So he couldn't transport it to the palace. So what did he do? Oh, wait. I am such an empty shell, and I need so much to prove that I have something inside and I'm worthy of it. I need that throne. So I'm going to move my palace to Shushan. Imagine Trump has in Detroit like a new, like, I don't know, like office, like an amazing office, right? Is he going to move the White House from Washington, D.C. to Detroit? Doesn't make sense. But that's what Ahasuerus did. Again, in order to prove the world and his population, his kingship, that he is the good king because he can sit on that throne and not be rejected. So it means that he is worth something, right? So he goes in Shushan, and this is where the story takes place. But why is it so important? Why is it the second verse? Because here we see again the hand of Hashem. It looks like, oh, it's a coincidence that all those workers that were so refined, that had those unique skills, were in Shushan. No, and you know those workers, they were mostly Jews because they had the skills, they had the talent that had been passed on from generations to generations, working to refine the gold for the Bet HaMikdash, Kelim and everything, right? So a lot of them were Jews. And they were living in Shushan. This is the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu bringing the entire story where it needs to be. There is no coincidence. It happens at the second verse of the Megillah to tell us, can you see already what Hashem is able to do? You think it's a coincidence? No. He used the Gahava, the pride of the king, in order to move the story down to Shushan, where it was supposed to take place. Many times in our life, we don't realize, oh, he did that to me. No, Hashem used him with his bad midah because he needed you to be in this situation, because something is going to happen in this situation. We saw it 2 weeks ago, with Yosef, who tells his brothers, I am Yosef. Don't worry about what you did. This was not your fault. This was Hashem's desire to bring me down to Egypt in order to prepare your coming a few years after. This is all Hashem's hands. So here we see, second verse, he's bringing the palace into Shushan, Hashem is using his gava to bring the story down to Shushan. Okay. Now, third verse. Who wants to read the third verse?
In the third year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all the officials and courtiers, the administration of Persia and Media, the nobles and the governors of the provinces in his service.
Okay. So before we go deeper in that verse, I want to do like a little recap of the Jewish history, just to remind ourselves what was the context of the Jewish people at that time. So again, we are after the destruction of the first Bet HaMikdash, right? The first Bet HaMikdash was built by Shlomo HaMelech 400 years before that story, okay? We are 1,000 years after the Yetziat Mitzrayim. I will share a timeline with you if you'd like, but you can still write down if you want. And we are 200 years before the period of Hanukkah and the Greeks, okay? So what is so important in this time of our history? First, the Babylonian Empire, who was so huge and owned half of the world, even, by the way, even Israel, right, had been conquered by Nebuchadnezzar, right? It was representing all that part of the world, in Israel included. And Nebuchadnezzar destroys the Bet HaMikdash, or at least first before that, he starts like not destroying it totally, but he starts to jeopardize the Bet HaMikdash. He takes over the city of Yerushalayim, and he exiles the Jews to Babylon. So this is the first galut. This is the first exile to Babylon, okay? What happened? Imagine how desperate the Jews must have been. We are now seeing our friends in Los Angeles witnessing the destruction of their house and houses through fire. But this was not the house of God. The Bet HaMikdash was the house of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was set on fire. It was destroyed. And we were exiled. What bigger darkness can we imagine for the Jewish people, right? So in this exile that was so dark, there was still a silver lining. A silver lining is like a ray of hope, right? What was it? It was that we were still in the period of the Nevi'im, of the prophets. And so HaKadosh Baruch Hu placed a seed of hope by having prophet, the Navi Yirmiyahu, express a prophecy to the Jewish people. And he said that he promised Yirmiyahu, he said that 70 years after the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, the Jews will be back to Yerushalayim, to Eretz Israel, and there will be a second Bet HaMikdash. Okay, the Bet HaMikdash will be rebuilt. Okay, so he gives that as a ray of hope for the Jews, right? But they are still exiled in Babylon, and when in Babylon, they have to leave. Now, 70 years basically is 3 generations. So when we are as we are speaking, as we are reading this story of Meguilat Esther, we are actually in the moment of the 3rd generation. So, you know, like it's like the generations that descend from Holocaust survivors. They had their grandparents who were Holocaust survivors, then they had their parents, and then they were born. And what happens is, sorry, I'm just going to check for, oh, they canceled the lunch. I'll have to work on that at the, okay, so so they are looking for going back to Israel. They know that it's coming, but at the same time, like it's distanced from their experience because the new generation has never seen Eretz Israel. And at the same time, do you settle down in a country when you know that you're going back? You don't really settle down. Maybe they would live in an encampment, or I don't know, right? But how do you live your life knowing that in not even a lifetime, you will be back to your homeland? So they were living with a lot of anxiety and darkness. And then another gift that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made is that he sent another prophet. Remember, we're still in the period of the prophets. He sent Daniel Hanavi, and Daniel will make another prophecy. So the son of Nebuchadnezzar takes over his father at that time, and then his grandson Balthazar, right? So this emperor knows the promise of Yirmiyahu that the Jews will be back to their homeland 70 years after the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. Now, it's been 70 years that the exile started, and nothing has happened. The Jews feel like Hashem probably abandoned us, or it's impossible that Yirmiyahu, who was a prophet, was wrong, but maybe he abandoned us. He forgot about us. Nothing is happening. We're not going back home. Okay? So they start feeling very bad. And the Babylonian Empire is still very powerful, right? So what happens at that moment? Balthazar wants to make a big party to celebrate the fact that Hashem forgot about his kids, the Bnei Israel. And in order to do that party, what he does is he decides to organize a big party, and he takes all the kelim from the Bet HaMikdash that had been robbed by his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar, and he uses them to throw a party that was obviously not a kosher party at all, with lots of things that are impure and terrible. But at that moment, we said Daniel Hanavi is sent by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he's going to reveal something very important. He tells Balthazar, you are desacralizing and almost like throwing fire on our Bet HaMikdash that has already been destroyed 70 years ago. Tonight marks the end of your life, as well as that of your empire. Someone tonight will kill you, and your empire will be defeated. That is the prophecy of Daniel, okay? Now, Balthazar knows that a prophet of Israel tells the truth. So he says, okay, you know what? Since tonight we're having that big banquet, that big party, I'm not going to cancel that party, but I have to protect myself. I have to make sure that no one will kill me. So he goes to his private army, and he tells the chief of the army, you have to make sure that no one comes inside of the palace besides the guests who are already there. They're going to stay for the entire night. But even if anyone comes to the palace, even if he says, I don't know, like he knows me, or even if he says that he's me, the king, you have to tell the guards to kill him right away. Okay, no problem. So he thinks that now he's protected, Balthazar, and he goes into the party and he celebrates and he drinks a lot of wine and he overeats and he indulges himself in a lot of leisure and stuff. And he drinks so much that he becomes drunk and he ends up outside of the palace. He wakes up in the early morning, and he's outside of his palace and he's not really dressed properly. And he doesn't even know what happened because he was so drunk. He walks towards the palace and he tells the guards, let me in. And the guards said, I'm sorry, we got an order from the emperor himself to kill anyone who would like to come in. And so he says, what do you mean? I am the emperor. I am Balthazar. And so the guard, he's a little scared. He says, well, what if he is Balthazar? And so he refers to his hierarchy and he asks his superior, what should I do? There's this weird guy at the entrance. He pretends to be the emperor. I know we have the order to kill anyone, but what if it's him? He didn't even know what he looks like. The guards didn't have access to the emperor. And again, the emperor had partied all night. And he was outside in very different type of clothing. Yeah. And so the hierarchy didn't bother to come and check. And they say, an order is an order. The emperor said that even if someone comes and pretends to be the emperor, we have to kill him. So he was killed by his own order. Balthazar was killed, and it was the end of the Babylonian Empire. Again, the hand of Akadosh Baruch Hu. Oh, it's a coincidence that he said, if anyone comes, even if he pretends to be the king, kill him. It's not a coincidence. Akadosh Baruch Hu is taking.
They killed him.
Yeah, they killed him. And that's how Balthazar was killed. Now comes another king of Persia, and we know who he is. It's Achashverosh. So he takes over, and he conquers by buying, and he even buys actually the daughter of Balthazar, which is Vashti.
Vashti was the daughter of Balthazar.
Yes. So it's very interesting to know that she is really from royal legacy. She's the heir of the crown of Babylonia, but he is not. But by marrying her, he thinks he will gain credibility, legitimacy. But will he
Because
for
he's
real?
married the sister of his brother, the wife of his brother.
Not his brother.
I know,
He's-
but he pretended it was the son of the.
No, he
of the
didn't
Nebuchadnezzar.
pretend.
I,
He just took over the
money.
riches. That's
Okay.
it. It's 10:52 and we have a second class. And I think we're going to stop for today and we'll continue suspense. We'll continue next week with verse number 5. If somebody wants to write it down, we'll continue with verse number 5 next week, Bezrat Hashem.